So if you watched a My Hero Academia manga, watched a manga? You don't watch the manga, you watch the anime, you dumb fuck. You may be wondering, who the hell is this smoking hot flame boy? How did he get all of those scars? And what's his relevance to the overall story? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to explain in this video as I give you a full breakdown on the character known as Dabi. Now warning, there are some pretty major manga spoilers ahead, so if you want to stay a holy and pure anime only fan, I recommend clicking away now. Potentially to one of my other great videos. But if you're willing to take that leap into the utter heresy of manga madness, then stick around and prepare to have your mind blown. But before I begin, I'm going to give you a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button and bell icon to keep up to date with all of the new, amazing content the LunchTime crew is producing. So we all know Dabi as the serious fire quirk wielding edgelord of the League of Villains. But who exactly is he? And where did he come from? Well, as it turns out, Dabi's real name is Toya Todoroki, and he is in fact the long presumed deceased older brother of Shoto Todoroki and the eldest son to the now #1 hero, Endeavour. What a twist, is what you would be saying unless you happened upon any theory conversation about Dabi's true identity, as the theory that he was Toya Todoroki has been basically accepted as fact by the entire fanbase before it was finally revealed in the manga. However, what makes Dabi's real identity truly interesting is not the fact that he is Toya Todoroki, but it's how Toya Todoroki became Dabi. And to understand this, we have to go all the way back to the Todoroki family origins. Dabi's journey from the eldest son of the #2 hero to the unforgiving, murderous member of the League of Villains all started when Endeavour organized a quirk marriage with Rei Himura. Endeavour had worked day in and day out for years attempting to achieve his dream of surpassing the #1 hero, All Might. However, the time eventually came where this flaming hero arrived to the harsh realization that no matter how much time and effort he put into surpassing his rival, he just would never be strong enough to reach his goal. Accepting his destiny of eternally being #2, because he's a total piece of shit, Endeavour came to the conclusion that if he himself could not surpass #1 hero, he instead would create a child who possesses a quirk superior to that of All Might's who could achieve his dream for him. Talk about living vicariously through your kids. And so Endeavour bought his wife Rei, who possesses an ice quirk, that's right, bought her, and together they made a child in the hopes that it would possess a combination of both of their quirks. Cause why have fire or ice when you can have fire and ice? Modern problems require modern solutions. So eventually, Rei gave birth to her son and the titular character of this video, Toya Todoroki. Now when Toya was born, he was not only born prematurely, which apparently resulted in him being pretty small for most of his childhood, but he was also born with a full head of red hair. This was the key indicator to Rei and Endeavour that he did not possess the quirk they were looking for. Instead of having the perfect balance of Rei and Endeavour's genes, he predominantly inherited the genes of Endeavour, making it highly likely he had just inherited a flame-based quirk. Knowing that Toya did not have the quirk they were looking for, Endeavour and Rei tried again, and Toya's younger sister Fuyumi was born shortly after. Now when Fuyumi was born, they again immediately knew that they had not succeeded in their goal, as from her head of predominantly white hair, Fuyumi had undoubtedly inherited mostly her mother's genes. I mean, she had some little streaks of red in there, so it was pretty close. But it was at this time that Toya's destiny started to take form. When Toya's quirk began to actually manifest, it was confirmed that he did in fact inherit a flame-based quirk almost identical to Endeavour's. The key word being almost. As it turns out, Toya's flames were actually far more powerful than those of his father, meaning that with the right training, Toya could easily surpass Endeavour in strength and potentially wield a quirk which rivaled that of All Might's. Elated upon discovering his son's insane potential, Endeavour actually decided to stop trying to make a child who possesses a fire and ice quirk, and he instead focused on training up Toya to be his successor. Now you're probably thinking, oh, poor Toya, his father must have pushed him too far like he did with Shoto, and that's what drove him to villainy, right? On the contraire, mon ami. Why did I turn into Aoyama? While Endeavour did push Toya, surprisingly, he loved the training with his father. And in some cases, he even pushed Endeavour to keep the training going. To Endeavour's delight at the time, his son had not only inherited his literal fire, but also his burning desire to surpass All Might. Toya had been ingrained with the idea that he was destined to be the new #1 hero, and that he was the perfect child his father had always been looking for. And so, father and son trained happily together for many years until eventually Toya achieved his goal and made his father proud.
Are you sure about that?
Okay, that's not what happened. During one of their training sessions, Endeavour noticed that a strand of Toya's normally crimson red hair had turned white. And in this same session, the young prodigy seemed to have burned himself with his own quirk. And it's this moment right here, ladies and gentlemen, where the truth behind Toya Todoroki's destiny begins to unfold. Curious about their son's sudden changes, Endeavour and Rei visited a doctor to learn more about what was happening to their son. And, as it turns out, the doctor reveals that Toya actually does have a combination of both Endeavour and Rei's quirks. Hooray! However, it is the worst possible combination of the two. Talk about a rough break. While he does possess Endeavour's flames, he did not inherit Endeavour's resistance to fire, but instead, he got Rei's resistance to ice. Basically meaning that while he can create flames like Endeavour, his own body gets burnt in the process. Understandably, Endeavour was absolutely torn to shreds at the revelation that his perfect successor wasn't capable of achieving his dream. Toya, however, refused to let his weakness stop him, and despite his father giving up on training him, Toya remained determined that he would be the one to surpass All Might. I mean, Endeavour refusing to train his son because he doesn't believe he has the power to succeed is cold. But as we learned, the cold never bothered Toya anyway.
Was that a goddamn Frozen reference?
It's important to note here that the reason Toya was so obsessed with being the one to surpass All Might is because he knew that that was the only reason he was born in the first place. He was aware that the reason Endeavour and Rei had children was for the sole purpose of beating All Might. So him being unable to achieve this purpose made him believe that he was a failure, a mistake. This resulted in Toya training by himself, which also resulted in him burning himself against his father's wishes, hoping to prove to Endeavour that his existence wasn't just another one of his failures. Realizing that Toya wouldn't listen to his demands to stop, Endeavour decided that the only way to prevent him from going too far and burning himself alive was to have a child with the perfect quirk, to have a child that possesses the power that Toya doesn't. Because come on, what better way to convince your child they will never achieve their dream than having another child who is genetically better than them in every way? Youngest siblings, rise up! And so, after 2 more attempts, Endeavour and Rei succeeded, and Shoto Todoroki was born in terrifying glory. However, Endeavour's plan to convince Toya to stop training, unsurprisingly, didn't work. In fact, it made the situation 1,000 times worse, as Toya watched in utter despair as in his eyes, his parents tried and tried again to correct a mistake that was his existence. It's also really interesting to note that as time passed and every time a new sibling was born, Toya's hair became more and more white, with it fully turning with the birth of Shoto. It's a nice reflection of how with each child, Toya came closer and closer to essentially becoming obsolete in his father's eyes, with his hair losing his father's color entirely as the child who would take his place was born. Realizing that with the birth of Endeavour's true successor, that the purpose of his own existence was meaningless, Toya went to Endeavour's training ground once more and in desperation trained his little heart out, crying for his father to just look at him. Upon returning home covered in burns, Endeavour scolded Toya for continuing his futile pursuit of surpassing All Might, the pursuit of which Endeavour had initially fueled with a heated passion. Endeavour even begged Toya to forget about training and to focus his efforts elsewhere. Of course, Toya, hearing these words, believed what his father was actually telling him was to give up and accept he was a mistake. Filled with a newfound unbridled rage, Toya burst into tears and made a desperate flaming dash towards the person who was the physical embodiment of his failure, Shoto. And as he did so, he cried out to Endeavour to just look at him again. Take note, future parents, if your 8-year-old child is going through an existential crisis about the purpose of their own existence, the best solution is probably not to keep having more children. But luckily for all of you Shoto stans out there, Toya actually didn't lay a finger on his baby brother, because Endeavour beat him before he got the chance. Hope you're happy, you sick fuck. After being stopped by his doting father, Toya was then put on watch by Endeavour, and baby Shoto was isolated from the rest of his siblings for his safety. And then, things went back to normal. Toya forgot about his dream and mingled with the rest of his younger siblings, and they lived a relatively normal life. That is, until 5 years later. You see, going back to normality was actually an act by Toya, as he had been secretly festering all of his repressed emotions and had been continuing his training in secret. Over the 5 years, he had gained a newfound hatred for the women of the household, as he believed they just couldn't understand the passion and drive required to be the #1 hero. He also ranted nightly to his younger brother Natsu about how everything was Endeavor's fault, and when Natsu had enough of his older brother's desperate ramblings and asked him to stop, Toya burst into tears and begged Natsu not to abandon him like everyone else. And when Rei finally caught Toya training and tried to encourage him not to follow his hell-bent obsession with his father, Toya told her off and said he also blamed her for his existence in the first place. That's right, Dabi fans, at the age of 13, your beloved character was misogynistic, overly obsessive, and suffered from severe abandonment issues. Dear God, that poor child. Clearly, young Toya was not okay. He was a mere one bad day away from losing his mind. And unfortunately for him, that one bad day was arriving sooner rather than later. As he continued training his power, Toya learned that the strength of his flames were directly tied to his emotions. The more emotional he got, the more powerful he became. He came to this realization around the same time he was beginning to hit puberty, which meant not only did he have a growth spurt, but his quirk also began to develop as well, turning his flames from Todoroki Red to classic Dabi Blue. Shocked by this sudden growth in power, Toya was convinced that if Endeavour saw his newfound strength, he would accept that Toya wasn't a failure and would give him the attention he so desperately craved. And so, with tears in his eyes, Toya asked Endeavour to come to his training ground so he could finally prove to his father that he wasn't a mistake. Honestly, it's kind of a heartbreaking scene, but we haven't even reached the saddest part. After arriving at the training grounds, Toya waited patiently for his father to show up. And he waited, and he waited, and he waited. And guess what? Endeavour never showed up. As Toya sat in the forest training grounds, he eventually came to terms with the truth of the situation. His own father, the man he looked up to his whole life, the man who inspired him, and the person who he based his entire self-worth off of, had abandoned him. And with this, the culmination of all of Toya's repressed anger, guilt, hatred, and sorrow finally erupted, and it did so in the form of a blazing inferno. No longer able to control the emotions that dwelled within, Toya burst into an explosion of flames against his own will. And, in an ironic twist of fate, the son of the flaming hero Endeavour was burnt to nothingness by the power of his own flames. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the life and death of Toya Todoroki. Wait, wasn't this about Dabi? Oh yeah, so basically, while Toya supposedly burned to death in the massive inferno he created, in truth, he somehow managed to survive this endeavor. And as of the recording of this video, it is actually unclear as to what exactly happened to Toya in between the events of this fire and his first appearance in the series as Dabi. But what we do know is that Dabi's life as a villain is the result of his feelings towards Endeavour. His main goal is to not only kill Endeavour, but to make him suffer as much as possible. And what better way to ruin Endeavour's life than take away his pride and joy? Shoto. And that, ladies and gentlemen, for real this time, is my breakdown of the life and origin of the character known as Dabi, aka Toya Todoroki. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and comment your thoughts and opinions about the character below. What do you think happened to Dabi in between the fire and his first appearance? Did he survive on his own, or was he saved by an outside source? If you'd like to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe to the Lunchtime crew. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Plus Ultra.